Hey, you guys. So, in my own time of reading, I had something came out to me when I was reading John chapter 9. And it was in the story of the blind man that Jesus healed. So, I'm going to go ahead and go there. In verse 1, it says, as he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but the works of God might be displayed. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, and this is what I want to point out. In verse 6, it says, having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam. So he went and washed and came back seeing. Even if we get down to verse 11, it says, he answered, the man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight. Pay very close attention to when the man received his sight. It is very special that Christ touched some mud, spit in it, and put it over his eyes. That was the time of anointing. Was he healed at that time? No. He was healed when he was obedient to what Christ told him. He was healed when he was obedient to what the Lord told him. How do we know? In verse 11, it says, he answered, the man called Jesus made mud, anointed my eyes, and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So when I went and washed and received my sight, I went and washed and received my sight. He did not receive his sight when Christ anointed him. He received his sight when he was obedient to what Christ told him to do. Same thing in our lives, guys. We have to be very, very careful because a lot of times we think, wow, I had this encounter with the Lord. He told me what I am to do. He gave me my first steps. He told me that maybe he didn't tell you what to do. He told you that there's a high calling on your life, or he's exposed that to you in some sort of way, shape, or manner. Whatever it is that he told you, whatever anointing he put over your life, at whatever time he did it for you, you are not healed at that time. You are not healed until you follow through with obedience. If God has given you instruction, you must follow those instructions in order to receive or see the anointing come to pass. Okay, so let me show you another verse. If we go back to the Old Testament in Exodus, this is after God spoke to Moses and told him what to do to speak to Pharaoh to release the Israelites. This is just at that time. And in verse 24, we're in Exodus chapter 4, it says, as Moses was on his way to Egypt, he stopped at a resting place for the night. Okay, so he's on his way to Egypt. He's already left the presence of the Lord. The Lord gave him instruction. He has this amazing anointing on his life. We know that this is huge. We still talk about this today, how Moses was the vessel used to free God's people to go speak to Pharaoh. That is a huge anointing on your life. And God anointed him. So as Moses is on his way to meet Pharaoh. In verse 24, it says, as Moses was on his way to Egypt, he stopped at a resting place for the night. The Lord met him there and tried to kill him. You might think that's quite confusing, right? Because he just anointed him to do something very great, of high measure. But let's see why. Verse 25 says, but Zipporah took a flint knife and circumcised her son. This is his wife. So this is Moses' son. It says, taking the skin, she touched Moses' feet with it and said to him, you are a bridegroom of blood to me. She said, you are a bridegroom of blood to me because she had to circumcise her son. So the Lord let Moses alone. That tells us that because Moses did not follow through with obedience in what the Lord had them to do at that time, which was to circumcise their son, he wasn't obedient. It didn't matter that God had already anointed him, gave him instruction and everything for this super high calling. He was like, he was not obedient to me. He was about to take him out. This is why obedience is so important. This is why it is so important to not only get into a Bible believing church, but a church that actually teaches obedience to Christ. Not just a church that reads the scriptures and tells you, go out and do your best, as if we're 5-year-olds. I'm talking about a church, a leader, a teacher that teaches that you have to obey Christ's commandments or you will perish. Christ says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. I believe that is in the book of John. You must keep his commandments. It's not an option. Too many leaders are teaching today that it is an option to follow Christ's commandments. It's not a decision you make on a day-to-day basis to see what works for you. No, it is, you must obey his commandments, guys. It is not religion like the Pharisees. Why is it different? Because we follow his commandments out of our heart posture. So we're not just going down a list saying check, check, check. We're following them out of our heart. We know everything that God has done for us, is doing for us, and will do for us. So we want to follow him naturally. You have to obey the commandments. They're important. They're important for salvation. That's all I got to say. That was an amazing read.